All right, we're at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Samvera Connect 2021. We're so happy that you're joining us today. I'm just going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So please note that this webinar has live closed captioning available. Simply click on the closed captioning button at the bottom of the Zoom window. And the conference is being recorded. We'll have videos available on the Sambira YouTube channel, and slides will be made available in the Sambira Community Repository. So attendees will receive links to both in the days after the event. We have the Q&A function and the Zoom chat for your questions. We have a Connect Slack channel available for conversation during the sessions today and after. If you need access to the Samvera Slack workspace, there's a link on Sched where you can request access. So today's sessions will run for 3.5 hours with 2 10-minute breaks. And in the interest of maintaining a safe and supportive environment for all Samverans participating in today's events, we'll read the Code of Conduct and the Anti-Harassment Policy at the start of each day as a gentle reminder of how we work together and care for one another. So Samvera's Code of Conduct lays out our shared expectations for respectful communication. The Sambira community is dedicated to providing a welcoming and positive experience for all its members, whether they're at a formal gathering, in a social setting, or taking part in activities online. The Sambira community welcomes participation from people all over the world, and these community members bring with them a wide variety of professional, personal, and social backgrounds. And whatever these may be, we treat colleagues with dignity and respect. Community members communicate primarily in English, though for many of them, this is not their first language. We therefore strive to express ourselves simply and remember that unnecessary use of jargon and slang will be a barrier to understanding for many of our colleagues. We're sensitive to the fact that the international nature of the community means that we span many different social norms around language and behavior, and we strive to conduct ourselves online and in person in ways that are unlikely to cause offense. Sambira conversations are often information-rich and intended to generate discussion and debate. We discuss ideas from a standpoint of mutual respect and reasoned argument. The companion piece to the Code of Conduct is Sambira's anti-harassment policy, and it reads as follows. The Sambira community does not tolerate harassment in any form. Sexual or discriminatory language and imagery is not appropriate for any event venue, including talks or any communal channel, such as our Slack-based chat rooms or our mailing lists. And harassment includes offensive verbal comments related to sex, gender, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, disability, physical appearance, body size, age, race, or religion, sexual or discriminatory images, deliberate intimidation, stalking, harassing photography or recording, sustained disruption, inappropriate physical contact, and unwelcome sexual attention. Participants asked to stop any harassing behavior are expected to comply immediately, and we expect participants to follow the Code of Conduct and anti-harassment policy at all meeting venues, community gatherings, and in online communication channels. Participants violating the Code of Conduct or anti-harassment policy may be sanctioned or expelled at the discretion of the incident response team in accordance with our Samvera Code of Conduct and Incident Response Manual. And you can see here the list of our community helpers who are available to help you with any questions you might have, any information you might be missing, or if you have any concerns related to the Code of Conduct, or if you need to report a violation, they're all available there, and you can see how to reach them. And if you're new to the community, there's probably a lot going on that may seem unfamiliar or unclear, and it's okay to feel a little lost or out of place, as most of us did at first. And many of us have found the best way to get over our initial discomfort is to jump in by asking questions or volunteering to help. We're an agile community working to make things better as we go, and everyone is qualified to help. There's no imposters here. And most of all, we want everyone to have fun, learn new things, and move Samvera forward. So now to start things off, I'm going to hand over to Hannah Frost, who will tell you more about the work we did this year in support of the Code of Conduct and the anti-harassment policy that I shared.
Thanks, Heather. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to my slides in the chat so you can follow along. And there are some links and stuff in there that you might want to refer to later. And now I will share my slides or my screen. Okay, everybody can see that, I hope. All right. So some of this will be a little bit redundant with what Heather has just said, but redundancy is okay.
Sorry, Hannah. Can you try again?
You can't see my screen?
Mm-mm.
Here we go. Sorry about that. Now you should be able to.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Again, some of this might be a little bit redundant, but that's better than gaps, right? Or lack of information. So as Heather was saying, Samvera is dedicated to providing a welcoming and harassment-free community experience for everyone. From the beginning, Samvera Open Source Collaborative has been committed to openness and transparency in all that it does, code, designs, and discussions. We're equally committed to helpful and respectful communication. Historically, women, people of color, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups have been excluded from technology work, and ironically, from open source software communities in particular. The Samvera community is committed to removing any barriers to participation wherever they exist. In recent years, it's been our custom to open the conference with a presentation on the topic of our community values and our shared expectation to reflect those values in how we behave and communicate with one another during the Samvera Connect events. Heather has done that a bit already, and I'm going to take some time on the agenda where we might more normally elaborate even further on our values in action, but instead use that time to briefly explain some of the important changes we've instituted this year to strengthen the safety of our community and its members. The Samvera community is a vibrant, dynamic, and honestly, sometimes a turbulent place. We believe one of our major strengths is our ability to work together collaboratively, supporting one another personally and professionally. We're not perfect and we don't always get it right, but we strive to apply all of these principles to our work and our interactions. To the best of our ability, we work to be humble and responsive, not defensive, when someone calls us out on not living up to these intentions. Our community has both an official code of conduct and an official anti-harassment policy. The code of conduct expresses our aspirations about how we want to work and interact. The anti-harassment policy provides a framework to promptly and supportively assist any member of the community who feels subject to any form of harassment. It specifies unacceptable behavior and its implications, as you heard. This policy is only one aspect of our broader intention to maintain a diverse and welcoming community that encourages contribution from all participants without bias. Both of these documents have been updated this year, and I'll say a bit more specifics about that later. We expect participants at all community events to honor these policies, and in fact, you agreed to comply to these policies when you registered for the event. If you haven't already, take time to review the documents. They're posted on the wiki, and you can get there by the bit.ly link that's posted here on my slide, by the link that's at the fine print at the top of the Connect channel in Slack. And a very cool thing we added to Slack just last week, there is now a Slack bot. So in any channel, you can just type in get COC and Slack will return the link that takes you right to the wiki page with that information. This is what it looks like when I did it in my private channel. So with the code of conduct and anti-harassment policy as a foundation, Samvera community members team up to provide help to those who need it. Any kind of help at all, and especially in the event someone feels threatened or there may have been a violation of the code of conduct. There are several ways to get help. You can send an email to helpers@samvera.org. Your message will be received by a small group of vetted volunteers known as the community helpers or just helpers. Their names will be shown on the next slide. And as Heather said, you can also send any of us a private Slack message or a private Zoom chat. That actually might be faster because I think many of us may not be monitoring our email while we're attending Connect. So this slide lists the incoming, now current community helpers, a new crop of community helpers. Look for us online. It should be easy to find because we should have a community helper label next to our Zoom name and Slack name and the rainbow emoji on Slack. You can also reach out to members of this year's Connect program committee, and their names are listed here. So thank you for the program committee. If you're considering reporting a potential code of conduct violation or have already contacted the helpers or anyone about your concern, we suggest you reference this new page that was recently added to the Samvera Wiki. It outlines information about the process and what you can expect as your report moves forward. Note that this and all the other documentation posted on the wiki under the heading of Samvera Community Safety now has a menu of links. You can see the lavender box in the upper right corner here. That is a menu of links to the set of related pages. So that facilitates your navigation to all of this new information. And to facilitate your understanding, we also included, thanks to Jeremy Friesen, a glossary of terms that are used throughout this set of material, because there are some new terms involved. All right, so now I'm going to switch gears away from talking about the code of conduct and anti-harassment policy as it relates to this week's events, and just spend a few minutes reporting out on the work we accomplished over the past year that got us to this point. It was the purpose of the Samvera Community Safety Working Group, which has been working formally since March of this year, to carry out this work. Namely, to establish clear, formal, documented process for incident response, to modify the Sambira safety volunteer structure as needed, to review and revise policies as needed, and to draft community guidelines. So let's see our progress here. With the invaluable help of our consultant, Annalie Flower-Horn, Samvera now has an in-depth, comprehensive, multi-page incident response manual. It's linked to on the incident response team page if you want to take a look. And we have scheduled to review it for any changes and updates based on our experience and changing conditions on an annual basis. This really is a major milestone for us in the community. Our second goal was to modify the safety volunteer structure, and this was also accomplished. We've separated the roles of the community helpers and incident responders to clearly delineate their distinctive responsibilities. You can read about those responsibilities and the differences also on the wiki. We've also codified and implemented a process for soliciting and vetting volunteers to fill these roles and have defined the length of a term for serving in one of these roles. Before, it was just sort of ad hoc and open-ended, which wasn't healthy. We saw the list, we saw the slide listing the new helpers a couple of minutes ago, but now is a good time to share the list of the incident response team members. So in addition to myself, the team includes Esme Cowles, Rosalind Metz, Alicia Morris, Beth Sadler, and Simeon Warner. While I hope that we never have to work together on an incident response, in the event that we do, I know that we all feel confident and well prepared that we can handle it. So after those components came into place, that's when we turned to reviewing and revising the code of conduct and the anti-harassment policy. These used to be two relatively disjointed pages that are now combined into one and have been edited for clarity and redundant and now irrelevant language removed. The policies are now readily available, as you've heard several times, and are scheduled for annual review by the safety volunteer teams. A fourth and final goal tacked onto our charge as sort of a nice to have is to formally draft Samvera's first ever community guidelines. We'd hoped to have this in place for Connect, but the work has been delayed. Our aim is now to complete this before the end of the year. I'm pretty confident we can get it done within the month. So stay tuned for an update on that. And with that, I just want to extend my deepest gratitude to all the members of the Safety Working Group. I believe we all agree that this is really important work, and we learned a lot as we worked through it together. So thank you all. So, and with that, I want to thank you for this time on the agenda and ask if there are any questions.
It looked like we had a raised hand, which must be someone who is a presenter, in which case you're welcome to unmute and ask Hannah your question. We also have the chat feature and the Q&A feature.
I don't see a raised hand. Maybe it was an accident.
It may well have been.
It happens. All right. Well, with that, I will wrap up, and I look forward to helping anyone who needs it.
Thank you so much, Hannah. We're running a little ahead of schedule, which is totally fine, but I'm going to hand things over to Carolyn for our State of Samvera.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, we are running a few minutes ahead of schedule. So I hope everyone is doing okay this Monday morning. I'm gonna share my screen here. Can you all see that? Can I get a thumbs up from Heather or someone?
Yes.
Excellent, right? Speaking into the void, always fun. Okay. One second. All right. So hello, everyone. First, again, thank you to Heather for welcoming us and to Hannah for going over our revamped code of conduct. My name is Carolyn Casey, and I am the current chair of Sambira Board. I want to thank you all for coming to this Connect 2021. Oops. Thank you to the program committee. We had Karen, Heather, Ilkai, Rick, Kevin, Robin, and I think that was it. Thank you to John Cameron and John Dunn from Indiana University Libraries for once again lending their support for our conference technology. For this portion of the program, I will be reviewing the state of Samvera. This has become a tradition for our Fall Connects. I'll provide you with a brief overview of the community. I'll talk about the current state of the community's work and our governance, and then I'll end the program with a recap of the state of the software. So first, the community. As we get into the overview of the community, I would be remiss to not acknowledge the 1-year anniversary of Heather Greer Klein as Samvera's first hired full-time community manager. Much of the work I'm going to discuss here would not have been possible for all of her efforts. So congratulations to Heather for 1 year. Okay, so let's begin with some of our vitals. To date, we have 33 partners around 60 adopters, and a little over 1,000 Slack members, and 14 active working and interest groups. This past year was tough. We were all struggling as the pandemic wore on. On the flip side, the pandemic reinforced and strengthened the work we do here within and as part of Sambira to make our cultural and scholarly digital record available now and into the future. As some of us rediscovered the meaning of community, we are reminded of what our founders envisioned, that our unique focus on the community rather than solely the technology will bring us together and sustain us. The community is on display here at Samvera Connect. This year it is thriving. We have over 200 unique attendees registered for the various presentations and events to be held over the next week. Our attendees span over 85 organizations, 5 countries, and 3 continents. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has helped to make this event happen. One of the things that makes our community special is our partnership model, where we invite organizations who are already invested in Samvera to become a partner. Anyone in the community can recommend an organization for partnership. We have some exciting news about new partners, as you can see on the screen. PALSI, which is the Partnership for Academic Library Collaboration and Innovation, and PALNI, the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana, have joined us as their joint Haiku for Consortia project. This project is developing an affordable, open source, and collaborative institutional repository solution based on Samvera's Haiku software. Additionally, we are working with 2 potential new partners who expect to join before the end of the calendar year. We hope to be able to announce them soon. Much of the work between partners is shared in an open monthly partner call and at a biannual partner meeting. Each call has time for a demo to share any feature development or other work that's being done in the community and locally. For example, this past year, we've had demos from Penn State, University of Michigan, Lafayette College, Northwestern University, Cornell University, Duke University, and Indiana University. All the demos are recorded and available. We encourage partners to contribute to these calls and these demos because you never know when a topic discussed here may blossom into a fruitful collaboration. In terms of collaboration and coming together as a community, I want to note the success we saw at Samvera Virtual Connect held in the spring of 2021. There, we had over 150 unique attendees join us over the course of 2 days. I want to take a moment to thank the Samvera Virtual Connect planners, John, Franny, Heather, Ilkay, April, and David. Another part of what makes us so successful as a community is our working and interest groups. For those of you who aren't familiar with our working and interest group framework, it was developed to provide a lightweight way of creating groups to accomplish work or come together to discuss shared experiences. Criteria for creating interest and working groups are listed on the wiki, and we encourage folks to engage in existing groups or develop new ones if the need arises. A number of these interest and working groups will be reporting out during our time together this week, every day except Friday. You can see them listed here on the screen. I'd like to invite everyone to attend, learn about the important work of these groups, and perhaps find a group you would like to get involved with. This is one of the main ways that we evolve as a community. So I invite all of you to help shape Samvera's future. As an example of some of the amazing work that these groups do with participation in them, we would not have a new code of conduct this year and the revamped helpers program that you just heard about. Nor would we have the technology maintenance hours pledge drive. Don't worry, you still have time to commit. We're at 30% of our goal. And we wouldn't have the code reclamation efforts that are bringing Globus and DOI into the Hyrax core code. Next, I want to take a moment to introduce the Samvera board to everyone. This is our second year as a fully elected body. While we will miss John Wise and Kevin Koczynski, who rotated off, and Jeremy Friesen, who was elected this year but found a position outside of the Sambira community, we welcome Harriet Green and we welcome back Rosalind Metz. And just hot off the presses to fill Jeremy's vacancy, we now welcome Nabila Jaffer. They join members Esme Coles, Hannah Frost, Brian McBride, Alicia Morris, Simeon Warner, and myself. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to the members of the board and we will do our best to answer them or put you in touch with someone who can. And partners, remember that every year, someone from your organization can run to be part of the board. Something else that makes the Samvera community different is our fantastic partners that identify as service providers. I would like to take a moment to thank CoSector, DCE, Notch8, and Ubiquity for help making the community strong. I'm now going to move on to our state of governance. Last year was a very active year for Samvera. We hired our first community manager, Heather, and introduced her at the last Connect. Immediately after, we moved on to a fairly enormous task, finding Samvera a new fiscal home, as our current MOU with Lyrasis was expiring in June of 2021. With input from the partners, the then steering group evaluated options for fiscal sponsorship with a set of criteria. The three organizations that were thoroughly vetted were the Lyrasis Community Supported Programs, Oasis's Foundation as a Service, and the Code for Science and Society project sponsorship. While all three organizations have had an excellent track record of services to projects, Oasis Open stood out by offering three important features: continued project independence, comprehensive fiscal and legal expertise, and a cost-effective fee. The partners voted in April to move to Oasis Open under their Foundation as a Service umbrella. The fiscal sponsor change has had and will have little impact on the day-to-day work of the community, but it simplifies our fiscal and legal processes and ensures our independence, as Samvera now operates as a 501c6 nonprofit under the Oasis umbrella. And Heather just now moved over and is an Oasis Open employee. Oops, sorry. Speaking of partner and their contributions, last year, or I should say this year we raised over $194,000 to help support the community manager position and other recurring expenses. This is an increase of $18,000 over the past year. As a reminder, in January 2020, partners decided to adopt a financial contribution model to replace the system of voluntary donations that had previously been in place. This contribution model is tiered based on the size of the institution or service provider. 2020 and this past year, 2021, or I should say this current year, are the transition years for partners. In 2022, partners will be asked to contribute the full amount based on the size of their institution. This contribution model provides us with stable income to assist with the hiring of staff for the community and with expenses like Circle CI. This slide provides a picture into the community's finances. We carried over a balance of around $272,000 from last year. Our operating expenses from July 1st, when we moved to Oasis, through the end of 2021 are estimated to be around $48,000. That includes a portion of the community manager salary, a consultant fee for a code of conduct review, and other expenses that I mentioned, like Circle CI and a Code for Lib sponsorship. Adding that to our cash in hand from fundraising, we currently have an estimated $418,000 cash balance at the end of December 2021. That cash available to us will allow for us to pay for the day-to-day operations of the community for over the next 2.5 years. From a financial standpoint, the community is secure. So what's next for our finances? Now that we have hired our first staff person and moved our fiscal home, we do need to turn our attention to the outstanding matter of hiring a technical coordinator role. Partners discussed this very topic recently at the partner meeting last week, and we landed on performing a needs analysis in the short term to determine what shape this role or roles becomes. Sorry about that. Okay. Lost my place for a second. Oh, okay, great. We're now moving on to the next section, the state of software. So thank you, Esme, for gathering our statistics from GitHub. We've had 35 contributors from 14 institutions with over 80 active GitHub repos in Samvera and labs. And there were a total of 1,724 commits since last Connect. You can see the most active repositories listed here on the slide. I want to draw your attention to where much of that time and effort has gone. You see on the slide here the significant releases since last Connect. It really does take a whole community of invested folks to accomplish this work. Some of the core component releases were Avalon 7.2, Haiku 3.0, Hyrax 3.0, and Valkyrie 2.2. Next, I do want to call out some of our software's key support systems. They are the Haiku Interest Group, the Component Maintenance Working Group, the Roadmaps Alignment Group, and the Hyrax Interest Group. Without these groups and the ways that they organize work, some of those releases would have not been possible. I want to give a big shout out to the individuals on these groups and to everyone who takes the time to ensure that the community software delivers value to the community. We did just grab these names off of the wiki, so there might be some names that we missed, or some of these names might be a little outdated, so apologies for that. We still appreciate all of you. I especially want to recognize a large contribution to the community, which is Tamsin Johnson's role as Hyrax Tech Lead. Tamsin completed almost 3 years in this role, and we are also very grateful for the energy spent to sustain the engine that many places use as the foundation for their repository. Thank you very much. We've had 4 developer congresses this past year, mainly focused on onboarding new developers, upgrading dependencies, Valkyrizing Hyrax, working on the React IIIF media player. DevCons are a great way to contribute back to the community, and we do have one set for November. I think it's the 8th through the 12th to round out 2021. I'd like to finish with the update on our technology by mentioning we are trying something new this year. The Samvera community is asking partners, adopters, all users of Samvera technology to commit to technical maintenance in 2022. Maintenance will be planned and scheduled within 3 timeframes. Section 1 is January to the end of April. Section 2 will be May through the end of August. Section 3 is September through the end of December. Institutional decision makers and individual contributors can pledge any number of participant hours within any section of 2022. There's no minimum. or maximum hours expected, and there isn't an expectation that an institution has to contribute to every section. Please go to the wiki page to add in your pledge by December 15th. And as you can see, we're about 30% of the way there. Our goal is 768 hours. I promise we're almost done. From the beginning, Sambira has been a self-organized, self-funded, and sustainable project. Partners join the effort because it helps them achieve their local priorities, not because they are chasing grant money. For Sambira, this is key. The community software survives and thrives based on contributions from the partners. That is not to say that grants don't play a role in the Sambira community, and over the years we have benefited from numerous grants. A reminder that if your organization or yourself is interested in including Sambira in a proposal for a grant, please email the Sambira board, which represents the project in these matters, or you can reach out directly to Heather, our community manager. We can help you from everything from plugging you into the right working group to writing a letter of support. And also, if your institution has a current grant, I know some of them are coming to an end soon, please do visit that wiki page to update that information there. Almost done. Last but not least, we have a new award to announce. This award honors the late Julie Allenson, a beloved Samvera community member who was an incredible mentor, teacher, and friend. Beginning in 2022, the Sambira community will present an award in Julie's name to a community member who exemplifies her collaborative spirit. Anyone in the community can donate to this award, and the award will provide funding to future awardees with a plaque and $200 cash. So you can see the link there if you want to donate. And we're done. Thank you again for joining us here today. And now we will break, I guess about 20 minutes until noon Eastern time before our first presentation, which sounds pretty interesting, Academic Equity Through Trauma-Informed Practices, Making Repositories Sustainable for Researchers with Lived Experience. I hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Carolyn.
No
We
problem.
have plenty of time for questions, and we'll extend our break so we can get ourselves back on track. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, I apologize for bad information. The chat is disabled. We've moved chat to the Samvera Slack Connect channel exclusively. There's a link to join at the top of the SCED page, so please feel free to join us there. But we do have the Q&A ability turned on, or if you are a panelist, logged in as a panelist, you can also raise your hand. But if you have any questions about the state of Samvera for Carolyn or for the other board members who are all present. All right, seeing none, we will take a nice break. Let me bring that up now. We'll take a nice long break to the top of the hour and come back for our first presenter session. So we'll see you then. All right, folks, welcome back. I'm at the top of the hour now, so I'm going to hand things over to our first presentation. So you can go ahead, Max and Chris.
Hi, everyone. You want me to start? Yeah, cool. All right. So hi, everyone. We're here. We're going to be presenting on academic equity through trauma-informed practices, making repositories sustainable for researchers with lived experience. And we're going to be sharing a little bit more about ourselves in just a moment. I know that some of you may be coming here with some questions like, what do you mean trauma-informed repositories? Why does this matter? Is this really even a thing? And so I just want to encourage you to bear with us. We're going to lay out a little bit about what we mean by that and why it's important, why we think it's important, and then we're going to move into some of the specifics and logistics of like what that might look like in practice. What we're going to do today as an overview is just make sure we talk about what trauma is. What does trauma-informed mean? Why is it an equity issue? We're hearing a lot of push in academia for equity and how do we involve impacted populations in research and study that's about their identities and their communities. So we believe trauma-informed is an essential piece of that understanding. And then we're going to get into specifics of how to incorporate a trauma-informed lens into your repository.
And I know that lots of y'all are probably doing projects that will relate to some of the issues that we'll be talking about, even if maybe at this point you don't realize that they're connected. And so I'd love it if you would share those that information and links to those projects in the Slack channel.
Cool. So this is us, and I'll tell you who I am. My name is Chris Ash, and I don't have anything to do with software development. I actually work full-time at a day job in sexual violence prevention, funded by the CDC. And then in my free time, I do a consulting practice where I work with national anti-trafficking organizations on projects, including projects around survivor leadership and involving impacted populations with national initiatives like Freedom Network USA, Heal Trafficking, the Human Trafficking Legal Center, and the Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign.
And I'm Max Cadle. I'm a software developer with data curation experts, and I'm also really excited to be next week. I will be shifting to be the tech lead for the Carolina Digital Repository at UNC. And I also have a lot of experience as a cataloger and reference librarian, so I'm bringing both of those pieces together. And my pronouns are he, him.
And my pronouns are they, them. And we are presenting currently from Carrboro, North Carolina, where we know we are on land that has traditionally been taken care of by the Shakori and Eno people. And we want to acknowledge that we're on that land and that we are in relationship with that land and that we want to respect the work that's been done to care for it and that we want to continue that relationship.
And Chris shared this excellent land acknowledgement with me from Adrian Wong, specifically for situations like this where we're all in different pieces of land, many of which were originally indigenous lands. Or have had historical indigenous caretakers. So I just want to acknowledge that even though we may be meeting together in sort of a digital realm, we are still affecting the land that we're on. We're using resources. And so I'll just quickly read this land acknowledgement by Adrian Wong. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join us in acknowledging all this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship.
So So we're going to start by just talking about what trauma is. And I know a lot of times people think that trauma is a memory, that it's just like a logical or rational memory of something that happened that went wrong. But it's a little bit more than that, because trauma is something that happens in the body when we experience an event that overwhelms our capacity to process it in that moment, or in which we're not able to keep ourselves safe. So it's a physiological response, not a rational one. It can be to an incident, to repeated harm, or to oppression, living under oppression or racism or colonization or misogyny or transphobia and queerphobia. Those are traumatic experiences that have this constant buildup. Sometimes I tell people trauma can be having a boulder dropped on you, but it can also be being pecked to death by chickens all day, every day. But it's a physiological response. So when we're talking about what a trigger is, we're not just talking about some rational choice to be offended by something. What we mean is that in our past experiences, when we feel unsafe, our nervous system floods our body with these stress chemicals, these fight or flight chemicals. And when we can't fight or flee, we end up freezing to tolerate whatever's happening and find a way to survive. It's a great survival strategy that keeps people alive, but it's not a way to live long term. And yet it has long-term effects on how our bodies navigate fear and safety, which means that in the future, you might be in a situation where you experience a trigger, which again doesn't mean that you're offended or that you're having a thought or a memory, but it means that something, whether it's an image, a story, a smell, a sound, something that you experience reminds you of this past trauma that you experienced. And because your body has lived with this dysregulated fight or flight system not working and not being able to keep you safe for so long, in that moment of the memory, all of a sudden your body floods with these stress chemicals again, and you are activated as if you were actually looking at the bear, even though there may not be a bear right in front of you. Which means there's ways to do things to reduce the likelihood of that happening or to mitigate the impacts when that does happen to people. And so we call that trauma-informed. There's also a lot of really great work on healing-centered. To me, those are not in opposition to each other. They dovetail nicely. But trauma-informed practices mean that instead of just setting things up the way you want to set it up and then moving forward and plugging on along and assuming most of the people you're talking to or working with don't have trauma, and then if they get triggered or traumatized, you're like, oh, wait, okay, so there's someone here with trauma. That's not trauma-informed. When we do trauma-informed, we start by assuming that there are people who are engaging with our repositories and with our words and with our practices who have probably experienced trauma in a variety of ways. And so we start by assuming there's trauma there and being thoughtful and strategic about how we create systems that mitigate re-traumatization and vicarious trauma. SAMHSA has created this list of principles of trauma-informed care, and they include safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender sensitivity. We're not going to do as much with peer support today. I'd like to think that some of that is what's happening in this space right now. But we are going to be addressing some of the other ones specifically as they relate to what we mean by a trauma-informed repository. And we do want to remind us, be gentle with yourselves and be realistic. Our goal isn't that if you do trauma-informed practices properly, no one will ever be triggered by the content. That's just not realistic, because different people have different experiences and different traumas, and that means they're going to have different things that trigger them. We may not know that someone is going to be triggered by an image of a particular kind of perfume, for example. That's not something we can anticipate, but we can anticipate that some broad categories like violence and oppression and racism are going to possibly elicit stronger activated responses in people. So we're not trying to account for every possible trigger. We're just trying to be aware that this is a thing that can impact people. Now, I want to just really emphasize that trauma-informed is an academic equity issue, because academia has almost always told the stories of oppressed people and people who have been impacted, especially those who didn't have power, who've been impacted by traumatic experiences or mental health issues, or certain kinds of oppression, their stories have almost always been told in academia from the perspective of the oppressor or from the perspective of the person who had more power over them. Research on people who have experienced complex trauma, like me, working as a survivor in the anti-human trafficking field, research hasn't been done by people who have lived experience of that. It's been done by people on the outside, prioritizing this external gaze. And that means that a lot of these systems for how we do academic work, including research, including repositories, these norms have been set up by people who don't have that lived experience and thus might not share some of those same triggers. There's been some course correction, and this wonderful picture of Carter G. Woodson is a very long ago example of when we see some of that course correction really fighting to have a space in the movement. But we know, even given what we've seen at UNC here in the last few years, we know that that course correction is still very much needed and still in progress. It's not completed. But there's been a move to elevate the work of scholars from within marginalized or oppressed communities. What are they saying about their own community, their own histories, their own stories and needs? And in my kind of field, where we're looking at social work, public health, studies on oppression, psychology, there's a call in those movements for researchers who don't have lived experience to step back and make space for either collaborations with or foregrounding the work of people who have lived experience of trauma, have them be the ones doing the research and finding the solutions. So I partner on a lot of research projects related to sexual violence. I have a good friend who's at an Ivy League university as a Black man with a trauma history studying mental health and trauma and Black men. So we're starting to see a lot of us engaging in our own research about our own experiences. And that's to strengthen the field and also sort of helps us unpack our own experiences by putting them into historical context. But what that means is that a lot of these systems that were created for academic research, including libraries and repositories, these systems were designed to meet the needs of people who don't have lived experience. And we know people from marginalized communities have higher rates of trauma statistically because of that marginalization and pushing them out of access. We also know that impacted communities are best created to craft authentic narratives that don't center an external gaze, to conduct relevant research and develop meaningful solutions. And we think trauma-informed repositories can be part of the solution.
Yeah. So just to circle back, these are the principles of trauma-informed care: safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender sensitivity. And again, if any of the things that we're about to discuss ring a bell for you, where you see that you're doing a project that relates to one of these, I'd love it if you would share it in the Slack chat. So safety. This is more about allowing people to take their own internal temperature and decide for themselves what is safe for them. So when we're talking about safety with digital repositories, we're not talking about something that's paternalistic. We're not talking about wrapping them in bubble wrap or top down or protecting from information and resources. This is really about giving users autonomy, giving them the tools to navigate their needs in an empowered way, and trusting users to make good decisions for themselves. These are professionals, these are researchers, but they need to be empowered. They need to be given the tools to keep themselves safe. Trustworthiness and transparency. So what is inside the box? What's inside the pot? How can we let people know what it is they're about to consume? So part of this is, I know that there's been a long discussion in the cataloging realm about descriptions, but we need accurate descriptions applied at all levels of a repository. And that includes what is the overall repository, what are the individual collections in that repository, as well as the individual objects. And those need to be neutral and not be assigning value judgments. And from our point of view, part of that description is also like, does this contain content that we know tends to be upsetting for people or overwhelming, such as images of war, violence, racially charged imagery. And there are ways to do that that is not assigning a value judgment, that's just informational. Transparency are things like allowing users to see their own settings, being clear about what data is collected, if any. I think this is something that libraries and librarians are very aware of, but I don't know that we always communicate those things to our users. So we might be really careful about not collecting data about what user is looking at, what objects in our repository. But I think it's really important, especially in this sort of age of Facebook and other big data places that are collecting that information, to let folks know what data is collected, for what purpose, how it's de-identified, if there is a way to opt out of it, or if we're being really careful about not collecting data, let them know that, as well as letting them see if there are any settings that are affecting their search results or the display of their results. And also, what's the history behind this collection or repository? If we're doing some reparative work, some, correcting historic descriptions that aren't done yet, or there are things that we know are issues, but that we're still working on and we're not done on yet, how can we be honest with our users about that and transparent about what they may see, acknowledge where we are now, while also acknowledging the work that we still want to do. So collaboration and mutuality, all working together towards a common goal. So part of that is user feedback. And as a developer, I've seen some great processes of user feedback, especially on user experience. But how can we bring that user feedback earlier and earlier in the process, especially feedback from folks from impacted communities, when we have collections or repositories that affect those communities or contain works that are reference those communities. So how can we bring them into the process earlier, and how might we engage their feedback, not only in terms of user experience, but also in terms of descriptions. One suggestion that Cruz made that was very important to them was the idea of user image tagging. And the possibility of using predefined tags, such as violence or racism, and have catalogers be able to apply from a small list, but also allow users to suggest predefined tags for objects, especially within those areas that are more sensitive. Empowerment, voice, and choice. So kind of, I see this as very connected with the safety idea, but we're giving folks a map of where they might go. Where are there possibly dragons? Where is there a lake? And where is there like a river with a crossing? So we're not telling them where to go. We're just letting them know what's available, where, how to get there. So this is a default HIRAC show page. So this is actually NewRax, which is hosted by DCE, and someone has uploaded an example photo of a kitty cat. And I like kitty cats. Kitty cats are not at all upsetting to me. But if I want to know about a study in lorem ipsum, I'm first confronted by a full-size image of a kitty cat, or the image of whatever it is, before I've gotten to read the description. So this is above the fold. this is the show page below the fold. So this is where all the metadata is. But then there's also the thumbnail of the kitty cat. I'll let you imagine for yourselves, what if that image was something more activating or upsetting? It might be within my research interest, but maybe I don't need to see the image throughout the time that I'm trying to get the information about it. One idea that we had as a possibility was just a toggle. So this is a mock-up that has a show viewer button here. And you could have your whole repository default to having the viewer off. In this case, it's a universal viewer, IIIF viewer. And then if the user read the metadata and decided, you know what, I do want to see the image associated with this, they could click show viewer. And there would be behaving just as it does in your standard Hyrax application. So you could set, this is something that you could decide to set on a collection level, on a repository level, but you could also maybe look at the user dashboard. And this is a mock-up that I made of what if the user themselves could say, you know what, just always show all the images, it's cool. Or they could say, you know what, I want to have that granular control over when I see the full-size images. So this is just one idea of an intervention that we could do to bring down the amount of vicarious trauma that folks from impacted communities and everyone really could have, especially when researching difficult topics. So another of our trauma-informed principles is cultural, historical, and gender sensitivity. And this image is just really bringing together that idea that none of our identities are separate. Each of us has many different identities that interact, intertwine, and affect how we experience those other identities. So one aspect of this, and I know a lot of work has been done in this area, is metadata. I know the folks at the UNC libraries have been working on conscious editing, so updating descriptions of objects and collections. And I think one big part of this is engaging with people from impacted communities. Another aspect of this that I know folks have been working on is updating subject headings, not necessarily using the existing Library of Congress subject headings because they tend to lag a bit behind what our kind of cultural expectations are and what folks from impacted communities prefer. And so you can use local translations, local vocabularies to update those. So you have a little bit more control. You're still using a controlled vocabulary. You can still connect it to the Library of Congress, but yeah, be able to update it to reflect your user needs. And then another connection is, so this is a screenshot from the National Library of Australia. And first they acknowledge the First Nations peoples. And then I'll just read the cultural notification, which says, Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are advised that this website contains a range of material which may be considered culturally sensitive, including the records of people who have passed away. And I added the bold there. And then you have a choice to either enter the site or presumably having read this, you could choose to leave the site. And I think that this is a great first step. This is, this comes up as soon as you go to their website. But what if we gave users more empowerment and choice? So instead of just having the choice of entering the website or not entering the website, what if they could enter the website with all the images or enter the website hiding all the images or choose to leave? Just adding that one more layer of choice and empowerment could do a lot for impacted communities. And so now what? How might we implement this? And I know we're running short on time, so I might just point out that this is sort of, a lot of these ideas come from Agile, start small, don't feel like it has to be perfect to start with. Think about what are your highest impact collections, what might be most impactful to start with, how can we incorporate stakeholders, and how can we think creatively about who our stakeholders are. Earlier the better, roll it out slowly and iterate. So now I want to open it up for questions. Yeah, I also see Hannah Frost mentioning bringing in sensitive content from the Nuremberg trial archives and thinking about how to handle it. So yeah, I think there are definitely collections where this is would be really valuable. I'm not seeing like the Q&A. There are no open questions.
Thank you so much, Max and Chris. I will say that in the Samvera Slack, there have been a couple different institutions talking about this being an interesting approach and something that they want to start looking at. And I think that this is a great example of potentially, if there are several institutions who want to grapple with this at the same time, there could be a working group to see if we could move some of those options into the core code. So thank you so much for presenting this. This was fascinating.
Yeah, and I want to particularly, you may have seen me around in the community, but I really want to particularly thank Chris for sharing their expertise with us. They're kind of a big deal, so I also like them. But thanks. Yeah, but I'm really grateful for you sharing your time with us today. Okay, I'm gonna run away now.
Thank you both so much. That was great. And yes, if you have any questions for Max, that Max could take on to Chris, then definitely put those into the Slack channel. Next up, we have Adam and Carla talking about Samvera design principles. I'll go ahead and let you all get set up and get started.
Hopefully, let's see if I can get this set up. All right, can folks see my screen okay? Hopefully.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, a couple minutes early, but I guess start with introductions. My name is Adam, go by he, him. I'm a UI developer at Northwestern, and be also presenting with Carla Artin from University of Virginia. We're gonna kind of like do a little handoff halfway through, so I'll let her introduce herself when she takes the helm. But we're here on behalf of ourselves and also the UX interest group. We're the co-facilitators of the UX interest group. And today we're going to present on design principles and how those may possibly relate to the Sambira community. So this is, I guess, kind of a culmination of work that we've been doing throughout most of 2021, which a lot was spearheaded from Samvera Connect 1 year ago when I was given a UX interest group update, and Carla reached out right after with some, I thought, really refreshing ideas about how to like think about user experience, like from maybe more of a higher level, which actually goes well with the great presentation we just saw. So instead of like focusing on, just like code semantics, stuff like that, really thinking about larger, I guess, principles related to applications. So to start with, by super high level, what are design principles? The Interaction Design Foundation out of the Netherlands, which has been a pretty good resource I've come in contact with this year, defines it as fundamental pieces of advice for you to make easy to use, pleasurable designs. So design principles are, just basically widely applicable laws, guidelines, biases, and design considerations, which designers can apply with discretion. When we apply design principles when we select or create and organize elements and features in our work. So these principles should be fairly universal and applicable to anything, whether it's, say, like designing buttons on your microwave, or maybe the features layout of your car dashboard. These are all kind of subject to good design and design principles. We, however, for this presentation, and probably mostly in the Sambira community, are thinking about design principles in the context of web applications. So maybe to help kind of clarify this with an example, here recently Spotify released their design principles, which are public and available for any and all to see, including members of their organization and their users, the general public. So I guess I'm kind of assuming that some in the audience have used Spotify in the past to listen to music, or perhaps something similar, Apple Music, iTunes, YouTube Music, something like that. So I guess I would ask, maybe consider your experience using one of those apps and just think about that for a moment. In those thoughts, does the information when you're moving through the app, does it feel, say, relevant as you search for your favorite band or song? Does the app itself, as you're kind of navigating through it, does it have a human vibe, or does it feel potentially like cold and maybe robotic? Or say when you go from like an artist page to a Discover Weekly playlist, or maybe your own playlist of curated songs, do all these different areas of the application seem unified? Or does it feel like as you go from section to section, maybe of the app, they're not necessarily tied together? So questions like this and considerations, I guess, are more or less design principles in action, and are questions user experience teams continually ask as web applications are being built, refactored, extended, and so forth. So I guess you kind of think of design principles as like the goalposts, which may guide application development. So the idea is, by applying these design principles in the applications that we're building, or whatever we're working on design-wise, we're aiming basically to predict how users will likely react to our designs. Ultimately, we want happy, satisfied users for our repository applications and the user interface designs that go along with those. So to achieve this, the data suggests, to achieve happy, satisfied users, data suggests we need to minimize two primary things: a user's cognitive load and their decision-making time. And the application of good design principles can help us achieve this goal. So why do design principles matter to the Sambira organization? Well, first and foremost, I think because we all love our users and want to make them very, very happy. But you also ask, like, why do major companies, say like Spotify in the previous example, why do they invest so heavily in design principles? And arguably because it works. For them, for Spotify, it attracts and retains users in a very competitive space. For Samvera, for the Sambira community, or educational or cultural heritage environments, it's a little bit different. It's not quite like Spotify, but maybe we have the opportunity to perhaps through like using community design principles as a proxy to maybe even like publicly acknowledge shared community values. In keeping, with this train of thought going, like what might happen if these, say, Sambira community values made their way into Sambira applications through design principles and these kind of application goalposts, which teams might use in reference while building applications. And then to maybe tie this together of why it matters to, why or how it matters to Sambira. Maybe just thinking about design principles is an opportunity for all of us to just take a fresh look at what we're building, why we're building it, and again, to focus on users and really ask, are we meeting users' needs in the most effective way possible? So the vision of what Sambira design principles could become. In a perfect world, this wouldn't just be a document that the UX interest group has been working on very diligently over the past year. But it would be, potentially a document that is owned by a diverse group of contributors and users. I mean, hopefully, the work that we've put into it so far, and kind of the idea of creating like an ongoing conversation, it's not something that we're just doing as like an academic exercise, but rather something that hopefully people can all find some value in, whether it's product owners or developers or graphic designers or whatnot. And thinking about this, maybe if we had like a set of design principles that were made clear and somewhat agreed upon over the course of the time, a set of these principles could be used as a tool to reference when you're first designing like an application, like say you're in the just wireframing stage, or you're just thinking about how to implement a new feature. Maybe consulting a set of design principles could just help in shaping the plan for future work. It could also, a set of design principles from Sambira could be used just to continually reference when in the process of actually building out the application. So say you're halfway through a 8-week work cycle, and just do a quick sanity check and make sure you haven't quite, you haven't necessarily veered off like a certain path. You could reconsult a set of these principles, given where you're at in your current development cycle, and just kind of measure whether you're still on track towards meeting those. And then finally, a set of Samvera design principles can be used as a tool to audit existing applications. So maybe there's an app that your team has built or the community's built that's a year, 2, 3 years old, and you're just looking for an opportunity to think about that application in terms of like design principles and evaluating it against some, some maybe newer, fresher criteria and identifying room for improvement within that application. And to, I guess, discuss the journey, because a lot of this was Carla's initial vision. I think now is a good time to pass it over to Carla.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you, Adam. Again, I'm Carla Artson. I'm at the University of Virginia. I'm a director of technology solutions within the library there. So yeah, continuing off of where Adam was, our journey this last year was really starting actually when I started my role at University of Virginia. The library was just publishing its own internal design principles for its web communication. So that's where the idea came from me talking with Adam of why don't we do this with Sambera? And from there, we looked at some other set of design principles that also available on a specific site that anybody can upload from their company. So looked at a wide range, but also heavily influenced by what we were doing at UVA as well. From there, we drafted with the UX interest group a first draft of design principles. We started with about 5. And then with that draft, we asked if we could crash some of the monthly meetings for the Haiku, Avalon, and Hyrax groups and present on them and get their feedback. Notch8 also was great and kind of tested out what we had so far and gave us feedback. And from there, we revised and we're now presenting and we're publishing. So next one, the output, what did we get?
If they waited long enough.
Yes.
Right.
So we have 3 principles, the used design principles, a little bit of a cheeky play on words, hopefully sticks in your mind. So 3 principles, U being user-centered, S being socially responsible and sustainable, and E for efficient. Okay, but wait, there's more. Along with your use design principles, you also get this handy dandy tool, which we are in beta version for, but we put together a spreadsheet of the 3 principles, but with questions to go along with them, open questions. And the idea is that you can take this and use it as a base to take and reflect and discuss with your teams or with your users, and really kind of get those good deep discussions going instead of, are we doing this or aren't we? Yes, no. Well, let's actually maybe talk about the terminology we're using as well. What does it mean to be user-centered and kind of things like that. And then using that this spreadsheet also allows for you to rate how well you think you're doing. And then you can use that to potentially identify and prioritize where you'd like to go next with how well you think you are doing with adoption of these design principles. So next one. So breaking it down even further, what is user-centered? So user-centered, our sub-themes include accessible and universal, and some of the questions in that spreadsheet listed here. How familiar does the user interface feel? What does that mean? Is a good question as well. How cluttered does the application feel? How does the application use simple language? So those are some examples. Engaging and intuitive. Some of the questions there. How easy is it to switch from using another application to this application? Where does the user feel friction when trying to complete a task and so forth? And you can see the little rank column as well, where you could put how well you think you're doing on a scale of 1 to 5, and then the average score below. The third sub-theme is inclusive and equitable. So some of these questions include how welcoming and approachable is the application? How does the user experience stay consistent across different devices? Does the app empower the user to successfully complete their journey? And what does that mean as well? I think a lot of these conversations can also say, well, what do we mean when we say this? And you might find that there's assumptions made by different parties within your group of, oh, well, I meant this coming from a developer background versus a user background. This is what I thought that word means, or that's what that means to me. So yeah, that's user-centered. The next principle, socially responsible and sustainable. So our sub-themes there are prioritizes standards and best practices. Does the app use popular open source libraries and packages? Would the application continue to meet standards and best practices if core developers left? The other one is clearly and fully documented, something that we always intend to make time for. Where would a user find the application's documentation? Does the documentation branding and structure stay consistent? And if there was a new developer, where would they find the documentation that they needed to move forward, and how easily could they find it? And I also wanted to say that, again, that this spreadsheet is a bit in beta version. So we've put a lot of questions in there, but we also would love to hear people's feedback as they start using it on some other great questions that they've come up with that we could add. And the spreadsheet was also set up so that if you want to go and change it for your own purposes, once you get it and you download it, you can also add in some questions that are specific to you. So the fourth subtopic is realistic resourcing. What do I mean by that? If you are going to use an application at a local level, do you have people on staff that can support it? And what happens if people leave? Building in that resourcing. So who has access to the source code as well? Are bug issues outweighing new feature issues? So really thinking the stuff that you want to build out, do you realistically have the resources and time as well as human resources to carry this out as you're prioritizing the work? And then finally, transparent and ethical. Is the app's code base open source? That's very important for somewhere like Sambira. Is it community driven and managed again? And does the app have a visible public policy around user data collection and analysis? So yeah, and our third principle, efficient. So minimal in design and latency. Does the UI display more than is needed? Can the action be carried out with fewer lines of code? Questions like that. Consistent and predictable. How easy is it to understand and follow with minimal to no training needed? And then the third sub-theme is modular and interoperable. How does the app take advantage of drive principles, and how is it logically separated? So, and for interoperability as well, it's very important when we're bringing in other applications that we want to work alongside within this application. So yes, so those are our three main principles: user-centered, socially responsible, and sustainable, and efficient use design principles. So what's next? So from this point, we are going to continue to promote these principles out to the Sambira community. We'll talk with Heather moving forward on how we can do that with her involvement. Get feedback from you all and revisions for the spreadsheet once people start really using it. We'd love to make it a really valuable resource, not just to give you principles and hope for the best, but actually give you a really useful piece of how to use the design principles and really engage with them for your own purposes. And then also we would like to start looking for case studies of different places within the Sambira community where we feel that the design principles are working really well, that we can then write up and have as examples for the rest of the community to say, oh, this is a user interface that we think is really great example around accessibility or inclusiveness and so forth. And then we have another idea as well of determining whether if the spreadsheet is fairly successful, then would it be worth us actually developing a tool to also measure and track progress, so that if you wanted to do that as a team, use an application to kind of talk through each principle and rank how you're doing, that could also be a useful tool moving forward.
That could be something maybe for like, say certain teams are more like metrics driven or whatnot, or just like numbers and like, some kind of scoring mechanism. But yeah, I think as Carla mentioned, the idea of this is we're just brainstorming ideas of like how this could be, instead of just saying, oh, this is a useful like list of principles. How could we like try to make it a little bit more interactive, or just like thinking of tools like the spreadsheet checklist, and possibly taking that checklist and converting it to some kind of like app where maybe one day we could say, okay, here's maybe the top 5 most used Sambira applications. How do they rank by certain like community, I don't know, defined standards and metrics or whatever.
So yeah, that's us. We have an interest group update in a little bit as well, but we usually meet on the second Wednesday of the month, and then our space on the wiki and in Slack as well, if anyone would like to participate in the next kind of phase of this as well. We'd love to have more people join and give their voices to this as well, because we want it to be useful to you. Useful use design principles.
We can post that link maybe in like
the
Slack channel to the checklist. And the main takeaway is just having this kind of be, I don't think there's any like hard start date or end date or anything to this, but this could just be like an ongoing conversation, and maybe these principles look a certain, if they were to gain some traction, maybe they look a certain way in a month, and maybe 6 months from now, maybe they veer a little bit left or right. And I think Carla and I would be excited by that, like if they had some movement, and if they weren't just like a static thing, it's like, okay, here, we're done, moving on kind of scenario.
Yeah, and thank you again to everyone who has already contributed as well. It's been really nice having the feedback that we've had so far and the engagement. So thank you. Any questions? I don't know. How do we get questions?
Thank you both. We'll give folks some time to put questions or comments into the Q&A, but I wanted to highlight a few things from the Slack. Claire said that these principles are applicable across a lot of work and life situations. And Rosie said that this would be a good checklist to use when evaluating any software. A lot of support for the idea of formatting this as a checklist. And Ilkay pointed out that we all have our bias when we're building something new, and it's good to have principles to base decisions on.
Great. Thank you all. Yeah, and on the link to the page on the wiki, there's also a little brief description of each principle along with the bulleted points as well. And you can access the spreadsheet there as well. We say it's beta version. You can view only or download to use as you need it. We have a little section for forthcoming case studies. So if any of you think we're doing really great in this area, please reach out so we can highlight your work too. And then we're just starting to build out a resources section. So we've got the web content accessibility guidelines, WCAG, and then I've also added recently the Center for Humane Technology. They've started offering an online course that's asynchronous around foundations of what is humane technology. And there's a great design guide worksheet to see how well your applications measure up to what they consider as humane technology. So thank you.
All right, thank you both very much. I don't see any questions coming in, so I may just go ahead. It looks like our working group update folks are here. So 1 minute, I'll share these slides. All right, so it is time for some updates from a few of our working groups. And I'm going to let James start first with the component maintenance working group.
Hello, everyone. I'm James Griffin. I'm a digital infrastructure developer with the Princeton University Library, and I'm going to be providing just a brief set of updates for the component maintenance working group. Currently, while I'm serving as the chair, the maintenance working group itself has seen a period of inactivity over the past year, and there has been limited resources when it comes to the availability of members to actively meet and participate. And I apologize for a lot of this, and I really look forward to trying to reconvene a lot of these efforts in order to carry this forward. And I sincerely thank everyone who has contributed and been involved and remained patient. I definitely don't look to criticize anyone. I'm very grateful for everyone in terms of their contributions. There is currently a wiki for this. This was for phase 4 of the working group. I'm listing the members as none, given that, as I'll discuss in a moment, there's actually an active call for participation for reconvening. Then next slide, please. Thank you. So currently for our activity, as stated, I'm really looking to try and advocate for, or excuse me, propose for reforming this as an interest group. There is an active call for participation on the Samvera Tech mailing list, and I've also linked on the slides to the current proposal for the interest group. Please note that I am proposing that this be reformed as an interest group in order to ensure that we need not require three partner institutions or organizations to serve as members in order to reconvene and begin reinitiating our efforts. Currently, as specified within the message in on the mailing list, we're looking to try and schedule at least one meeting before January, and we're actively looking to request any participants. Anyone can join, and we please truly would like to make this as welcoming an experience as possible for anyone who might be new to the Sambira community. In addition to the Slack channel that was referenced in the previous slide, please freely contact me via email using jrg5@princeton.edu, or always please try and contact me on Slack. I will be posting to the channel momentarily. And these are all the updates currently for the component maintenance working group and soon to be interest group. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, James. So next up, we have Chris with the marketing working group.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Heather. So the marketing working group meets regularly on a Wednesday, the second Wednesday of each month. Every 2 weeks on Wednesdays, sorry, at 11:30 Eastern time. Via Zoom, and we have a Slack channel as well, which people can follow and catch up with the latest developments in the working group itself. We have a wiki page that can be details out the meetings that we're holding and contains the notes of those meetings and updates on also on some of the resources that are available to assist with any marketing that you might like to do. And I've listed there the members, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for all their very active contributions over the last year or so since the last Connect, which has been a busy year for us. I want to highlight that the purpose of the marketing working group, just for those not so familiar with it, which is our role is to essentially find ways of raising the profile of Sambira through various different channels. The Sambira as a brand, Sambira as a community, external to that community. We're very interested in the activity or any marketing activity that individual institutions carry out around Sambira, learning from those. We had a very valuable and insightful contribution from Notre Dame earlier this year on some of the activity that they'd carried out. But our primary remit is about communicating Sambira outside institutions, or at least not necessarily targeting any particular internal audience per se that you might like to, but that you might do as individual institutions. A summary of our current activity. Over the summer, we did some very focused discussions around a number of different activities. We took the opportunity of the summer break to review the Sambira website and also the FAQ. The website received some very useful input from a number of members of the community, and I'd like to thank all of the participants who took part in that. It was very valuable getting their input and their insight as to what was working with the website, what might have been need some updating, some refreshing, what had been superseded in terms of developments within the community itself. We're planning to do this on an annual basis so that we make sure that the website maintains its currency and that anyone coming to the website gets the full and clear picture of what they're engaging with when it comes to Sambira. We're also in the process of reviewing the FAQ that is on the website to make sure that those questions are the frequently asked questions that people do pose, and also that the answers presented there are as up to date as they need to be. One piece of work, we also had a discussion over the summer about the Sambira Repository. So for those of you, again, maybe not so familiar, is that Sambira has its own repository, which is very kindly hosted for us by Notch 8. And that repository acts as a sort of a holding place for all the materials from these Connect conferences and a number of other community activities and events. So a great rich source of presentations, documents, detailing progress and developments within the Sambira community for reference there. So hence, for use by anyone in the community and all of those with an interest in Sambira, we wanted to make sure that people within the community had the opportunity to contribute to that collection as much as possible. And so we've made the repository open so that other people can, everyone can deposit into that. It still has a mediated workflow, of course, to make sure that what's coming in is valid for the repository. But it is able and possible for everyone to contribute to that. And I know that that's something we'd like to encourage people to do from this conference. And we've also had a number of focused conversations and discussions around planning we'd like to take forward around institutional profiles in order to raise more awareness of the rich activity and development activity around Sambira repositories that we have within the community. We looked at the Getting Started wiki page that Heather's been working on to provide input to that, to make sure that it covers everything that is needed. For those of you who may not be so familiar, on the Sambira website, there is a Sambira Tour where you can actually then go on an interactive tour of some of the repositories that within the community, highlighting what those repositories do, how they serve their different communities and themselves, and looking in particular at some of the key objects and materials that those repositories hold. We're looking at how we can continue to develop that to make sure that it reflects the community as a whole and the richness of the range of repositories that the community has provided and delivers. Please take a look. If you do have any interest in that or would like to contribute, then do let us know. But otherwise, it is there in order to help promote the range of ways in which Sambira can be applied to the management of digital collections. And then we've just started a discussion about the partner prospectus. Heather kindly shared earlier that we have, of course, a new a new partner in the Haiku Consortium, and I'd like to offer my own welcome to them, to the community as part of this conference, and that we have prospective members, partners potentially looking at joining us. The prospectus is a key document for that because it helps to highlight what people are taking on board, what commitment they're taking on board, what responsibilities we're asking for, but also what benefits they will get from playing an active role in the continued development of Sambira. One point I'd also like to highlight is that Samvera Connect last year, we ran a workshop focused at AULs and equivalent roles on the role of repository and strategic planning, seeking to find a way of communicating to those people making more strategic decisions around repositories on how repositories play a role in that, and using Sambira as a use case. We were very fortunate to be able to deliver that workshop in a rejigged format to make it more generic at Open Repositories 2021. And we'll have that as a tool set that we can use as and when it's useful to be able to communicate to such a community. Next slide. So looking ahead, our next steps is implementation of the topics that I described that have been under discussion, taking forward those in more depth over the coming year. And we've also recently had a conversation about which conferences for 2022 that we will look to attend virtually or in person, depending on what actually transpires in those conferences, and which events we can promote Sambira through. So for example, we have over the years tended to sponsor and been present at Open Repositories, Digital Library Federation Conference, DLF Conference, and also Code for Lib. We're open to suggestions as to which events may be appropriate or useful to promote Sambira at. So if you have suggestions, then please do let us know. And as ever, of course, new members are welcome. And one of the great things about Marketing Working Group is that if you do have someone in your team who would like to be able to spread the word about Sambira and has that sort of particular leaning in terms of how they support repository development, then this is a great place in which they can contribute and play an active role. Thank you very much for that opportunity to provide an update, and move on to the next group.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I'll just echo, Chris, that the Marketing Working Group is a great group of folks, and we could definitely use new members anytime. Or if you see any areas of Samvera marketing, especially if you're new to the community and you found anything particularly difficult or confusing, we'd love to hear, because this group is always looking for the next thing that might need to be updated or refined or added. So thanks very much to those folks. And I'm actually giving the next update on behalf of the Repository Management Interest Group. So this was an interest group that actually retired this summer. The agenda was starting to dwindle, and the number of folks attending the monthly meeting was getting low. And so the organizers of that group decided to go ahead and sunset that group. But there is an active Slack channel. It's there. It's alive and well, and it's available for anyone to ask any questions. If you're not sure where to ask, or you feel concerned about putting that into our general channel, the repo management channel is a great place to go. So this is an area where I want to make sure that we're sort of providing enough in the community for folks who would have been served by this interest group. So I think one of the challenges that this interest group has always had is in the name, and making sure that folks who it is targeted to could realize that the group was really for them. And the idea was to have an interest group for folks who are repository managers or repository librarians, or really in any staff role where you are working to keep to be a liaison for your repository. Basically, if you're not a developer, because we have the tech call and we have lots of interest in working groups for developers, and if you're not an administrator, because we tend to see administrators in our partner call and elsewhere in the community, but if you are sort of in another role where you want to keep up with what's going on with Samvera and you want to be able to talk to your peers, the Slack channel is a great place to do that. But we have developed this survey, and I would encourage folks to spread the survey far and wide in your institution if you think anyone might have insight into what this group would need, if we need to reform it, or if there are other ideas or other ways that we can serve you in the community. It's a very short survey. It's just 1 page, and it lists a few potential training opportunities that I have heard may be of interest to this group. And I want to get a sense of if that's true and what we should prioritize. So the information that we gather in that survey will be definitely put to use in the coming months. And if you have any questions about this, if you're interested in restarting this interest group or some other interest group that's related, and you have questions or you want some help getting that started, please feel free to email me. I would be happy to help with that. And also in the meantime, don't forget about that Slack channel. There's a lot of great folks in there who are very happy to help. All right, so I'm going to turn it back over to the UX interest group folks.
All right. Yeah, again, this is Adam again. I'll just give a quick update. So a lot of what we have done in 2021 was kind of covered in our previous presentation, but just a little background info on the interest group. It is alive and well. We meet once a month, typically on the second Wednesday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And the Slack channel as well is listed there. If you go to the next slide, please. So yeah, again, for the 2021 highlights of what the UX interest group kind of took on, it kicked off the year with, somewhat of a yearly focus, again, on like just kind of reframing what UX means, I guess, to the Sambira community and trying to take people's pulse on what people might find interesting or valuable to their specific teams. So design principles is what we arrived at for 2021. We did, I'll try to quick summary of the presentation, but we start out just on conducting some best practice research, consulting other organizations or universities to see kind of how they handled this situation, like in a non, I guess, kind of like profit organization environment, and also just like UX best practices, and found some really good resources online, which helped shape what we eventually arrived at. We took this kind of as part of the process for how we went about this. So we went through revisions of the content that the UX interest group was kind of discussing, which is design principles, and kind of hashed through that internally in our monthly meetings. And then we set up meetings with Haiku groups, Hyrax, Avalon, and kind of attended their monthly calls or sessions, and had an opportunity to just give a little brief presentation of where we're at in the process, the current state of the design principles, kind of shared that with the groups, and got some really helpful feedback on what they thought was helpful, was not helpful, and where it could go from there. And then we refined, and just kept on refining. So, and we're, arrived at where we just presented on today. So it was a good year. And I think what we learned out of 2021 and kind of like rethinking about the UX interest group, because it's not really a working group, I think for the health of just engagement and whatnot, it seems like it's nice to have something tangible to deliver in some way, shape, or form. And I think the process of treating this past year, like having like a theme to it, kind of helped. 2020 was a little kind of all over the place, trying to just throw out random UX topics, which some were interesting, some not so much of a response. So maybe a pattern moving forward for the UX interest group could be like a yearly theme. And as we were kind of like coincidentally like discussing this in the past month at our past interest group meeting just last week, we had a newcomer throw out a great suggestion about talking about like accessibility and her experience, like kind of focusing on that over the next few months. And Carol and I thought, hey, what a great opportunity to maybe run with that as a theme for 2022. So again, in some way, shape, or form, I think that might be the focus for our monthly meetings and potential work to come out of that in 2022. So if anyone out there is interested in accessibility, which I'm sure most are or should be, now is a great time to come on board with the UX interest group and be part of the conversation and see where we can take this. One idea we had was maybe, or Carol and I had, was maybe, maybe we could take a look again at like popular Sambira applications and do some type of accessibility audit or whatnot, similar to what the UX interest group helped in about 2 or 3 years ago, I think, with the outside accessibility audit of Hyrax. And then the UX interest group kind of stepped in, took that report, and then helped triage a lot of those issues into GitHub, and to help kind of that guide Hyrax work related to accessibility. So, in maybe some kind of capacity, the UX interest group could step in and not only discuss like, current best practices or like which requirement level to match with like different like organizations and whatnot, but then also maybe take that and apply that to Sambira applications in some kind of consulting-ish kind of, or just working together scenario. So that's what our loose plans are for 2022. So if anyone's interested in anything UX or accessibility related, we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks everybody for those updates. We have a couple minutes. Are there any questions for the folks who gave these working and interest group updates? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Feel free to put your questions into the Q&A or into the Slack chat for the folks who presented. And yes, we will go ahead and take our break. And we will come back at 1:30 Eastern. So we get about a 12-minute break. And at 1:30, we will have a presentation that I'm looking forward to about story mapping to align and prioritize your team's feature development. So we'll see everyone then. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's time for our next presentation. So I'm going to hand things over to Rachel and Norm.
All right, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see your screen.
Thank you, great. So hello and welcome back from break. And welcome to story mapping to align and prioritize your team's feature development. I'm Rachel Lynn. I'm on the product team at DCE, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. We've had success using story maps sessions with our customers as we co-develop and also on our internal projects to keep our projects on track and our teams aligned. And we really thought this might be a great thing to share. If you haven't used them, maybe this will be an opportunity for you to try them out. If you have used them, maybe this is a good refresher, and or it might just be another take on something that you already do.
Yeah, hi, I'm Norm Morstead. I'm the designer here at DCE. My preferred pronouns are he and him. Hopefully everybody can see our mural board correctly. Yeah, what are we going to learn? We're going to learn how to bring about team alignment and story prioritization through story mapping. Why story mapping? Let me just click to the next slide here. So story mapping helps us to prioritize backlogs and to ensure team alignment and understanding. So one of the first things we want to help understanding is some of the tools you can use. And the actual tool we're using on the screen here is actually the mural. This is basically an unlimited whiteboard. I'd love it if everybody could click on the link that was shared. And if you haven't, again, we can try that one more time. It'd be great to see everybody on the board here at once. I'll make sure I can show all the participants. I see a couple. All right, everybody's starting to come on here. So I'm going to start.
And feel free just to watch and follow along that way. But if you want to just get a feel for the application, feel free to jump in. Sorry
for all the zooming here, but what's nice about this tool is that if we can see everybody's everybody on the board is all over, and so I actually can turn off that ability to show collaborators cursors. And one of the reasons we want to do that depends upon the activity you're doing. If you want to make sure that everyone is there, that's one way to make sure you can see people are moving and being actively engaged in what your conversation is. In this case, I'm actually going to turn it off and hide everybody's cursors for this moment. And I'm also going to grab everyone to me. So everyone should have been brought to the screen in front of you. Why story mapping tab. Let's see, what else can I share about this tool? One of the things you'll see right now is the why. On the left-hand side, you'll see all my frames. And when you actually start the product, you actually won't see the frames. You'll see just like a big blank screen. Well, one of the things you can do is just create a frame quite quickly here. We can change the color to the background. We'll just maybe do a white, and then we can start adding sticky notes. So it's just the same as if you were in an actual whiteboard, Post-it notes. We can start changing these colors to make some some differentiation that we'll see later on in our presentation. But you can start actually typing in these. Hello, Samvera. And we can actually then start copying these quite quickly. You can see how quickly we can start filling up an idea or a conversation within the virtual whiteboard that we have.
And the great things about the frames is that it helps to focus our attention, focus the team on what we're doing at a given time. And also that bring all to me feature has been very helpful too. Sometimes when the canvas is huge, you just kind of need that help to get to where everybody is.
So I'm going to turn on the frames back on because we kind of have a process to go through there. So I'm actually going to go back to Rachel.
All right. So before I start, a word about Agile. So DCE does use the Agile Framework. So I just wanted to let you know if a frame is unfamiliar, just please don't hesitate to ask in the chat about whatever that might be. And we'll have time at the end in Q&A. So how do we get started with story mapping? First, we need to gather the team. We need to make sure that we have the right people at the table. This might be your technical and product teams. This might be even some key stakeholders. For this, preparation is key. So whether you have the opportunity to be in person and it's Post-its and Sharpies and a huge whiteboard, or in our case, a virtual space, you want to make sure that you've kind of set the stage like we have here. We might have a template here, and we might have another frame that is for all of the team collaboration. But that preparation is really helpful and will help your session be a success. So another thing that you might want to do is what we just did with Norm. You might want to have an orientation on the tool, just to make sure that everyone there knows how this tool works and is able to navigate, again, to help us just be successful, and so everyone is ready to participate when we start. So as you can see here, Miro has some great templates to start with, a plethora of templates. So this is actually a user story template. And we tend to start with these templates just to give us a structure. We might move things around. We might have be opinionated and rename something. And in fact, I did rename. These were stories. It was different on the left side, themes, and we added, because we like the structure of themes at the top, epics, and stories. So, so it is great to start with those templates. So the very first step of story mapping is to define your goal. What is the project or feature we're here to map out, and why, so that everyone knows what we're building and why it's important to build it. We start then also to build that common language around the project or feature. So in our example, we're trying to determine how to be the best pet owner in the whole galaxy. Yours will be more detailed and focused on the user. Like, for example, our goal is to build out faceted search for our digital repository so that our students and researchers can more easily find. So you get the picture that we're really trying to be a little bit more detailed about what we're building. So we want to define what that is. And then we also want to, this might be that we're going to story map an entire project, or we're going to just focus on a key feature or a set of features. So thank you. So the next step is idea generation. And this is where team collaboration is super important. So in this case with Miro, everyone would have been invited to the board and would have the opportunity to grab Post-its or cards and start filling out. And this is where we are just generating as many ideas about the project or the feature that we can. So we want to come to consensus first on who is the user. Throw out, again, all of the ideas. In this case, we've kind of stopped at dog owner, cat owner, and iguana owner. If anyone has an iguana, I really want you to post that somewhere. But so we have to kind of start there and get that structure of who will eventually be the user. So some of the, for instance, like all of our users here need fresh water and food, but then it could be that the iguana owner has some really specific requirements, and we just want to note that, whether it's here or in one of the next steps. So in this part, we are trying to figure out what are all of the things that come to our mind. Eventually, these will be stories. or it could be epics or themes, but really we want to generate all of the possible ideas and even identify the edge cases and that might come up. So again, I said that these will become our stories. What we want to do is give everyone enough time to generate as many ideas as possible using one card per idea. Encourage people to write down everything, even if they already see it on the board. What we find is that duplicate cards really can indicate that there's already a sense of shared context, which is always good to know. And it might also indicate just inherent value of that one thing. So for this step, we want to find all of the ideas and, like I said, expose all those edge cases. And as you can see, Norm is starting to already group them. And that's the next step. So the goal here now is to put all like ideas together. Outliers might have their own separate space. But eventually we will start to have a structure around the themes, and themes will emerge. So labeling is useful in that. So we like to also use verbs whenever possible. This just helps us stay connected to the action and the user value. So at this point, you could read them all aloud. We like to do that. So you can read them all aloud. You can assign one person to read them and someone else to move the cards around. You can go round robin fashion and have everyone take turns reading, but reading them aloud really helps us focus on the one thing at a time. And this is a good time to encourage conversation and for the team to seek clarification. It could be that, you know, some of these make sense to the person who wrote them and not so much to others. So conversation is super important. Some broader themes and epics might start to emerge at this point. Right here, you see that the themes are kind of labeled in black. And it's good to identify those as we've done here. So it starts to resemble a little bit more of the structure that we're going to eventually see in our story map session. So you can see that we've got the high level theme of medical. And then we've kind of, as we've moved some things around, we've realized, oh, you know what, there's this theme of what about the one-time visit to the vet or the emergency vet or the routine visits. So then when we go to our, before we do this, I just want to, yeah, no, you're right. So a key here now is that we could start to put these onto our story map right away as is. But one thing that we've found is that it's really important to just take time to figure out what is the priority of all of these, what's the value, and what is the effort involved with these. So I don't want to go too deep into this because this could have its own session. But an effort impact scale is super helpful in determining what we should focus on first, second, and third. In our example, probably all of these are high user value because as a responsible pet owner, we should really do all of these things. But it might be a matter of when do we do them. So as we plan our actual work, determining the value and effort will inform what work we do and in what order. We want to deliver really the highest value as we possibly can. But if we can determine what is of highest value and least amount of effort, we might want to play those stories first. But on the other hand, it could be that we have identified some super high value stories, but that also have really high effort. And it could be that that is an indication that that's something of risk, and maybe we want to play that earliest and get that in the top of the backlog. So this really helps us determine what's important to do and kind of when. Again, this is another opportunity, a really good opportunity to really have those conversations and work with the development team, especially the development team might, someone might say, well, I think that's really high effort, where someone else might say, I don't think so. And this is a conversation that we can have here. We can also have these conversations more as we're doing our backlog refinement and story writing. But this is a good place to start those conversations. And it really informs what we're going to then put on our story map. So if we go to the story map, and I want to point out at this point that this all doesn't have to be in one session. In fact, it probably won't be, and it's going to be iterative. We've come back to these a number of times or started fresh. So so just know that this might come 2 or 3 days later after you've started this whole process. But so again, we're going to use this Miro template. As you see, it starts with the persona. For this one, we're focusing on dog owner. And we start to populate this board with all of those tickets that we've been talking about for maybe days now. And we start to just really flesh out the ideas. We've here determined that, again, like we did saw in the brainstorm session, that we have feeding, but really that comes down to more of feeding and hydrating. And then we get down to the story level, where we, you might want to put these into story format. If you're familiar with the story format of as a blank, I want to blank so that, and the benefit. In your world, it might be, as a researcher, I want to search the repository so I can find a rare manuscript I'm looking for. And then from there, whether it's in story writing sessions or here, you can start to develop what are those acceptance criteria for those tickets. But again, the real important part of a story mapping session and all of its parts are really to gain that kind of shared context for what we're doing and through all those conversations. All right. Oh, and then so we've talked about our dog owner, but it could be now that in another session or as we've been talking, we've just been pulling some of the cards that are specific down to this other board for cat owners and iguana owners. But eventually we'll want to flesh out the stories that are specific to those different personas as well. All right. Well, so what are some of the key takeaways that we want to kind of highlight? Again, plan for multiple sessions. Story mapping can take multiple sessions with the team. The amount of time depends on whether you're starting to map out an entire project, or if you are really going to focus on a key feature, maybe it won't take quite as long. Story mapping can be done at any point in the project. This is really important. It's a way to align in the first place, but it's really another way to realign at any point in a project for any reason. It's you might get the eye roll from the occasional team member that, oh my gosh, not another meeting. But if this is just, if we end up aligning more than we were, it is going to help our velocity. And sometimes we just need to hit the pause and say, are we still working on the right things? And is now the right time to be doing those? So we want to encourage team participation. This will help build that consensus through real engagement as a team. Story maps are not documentation. This is kind of important that it's not, it is the place where we go to generate these ideas and to have the conversations and to iterate. And conversation and mutual understanding is really one of the main outcomes from story mapping. We also try to really focus on user value and keep that at the core of all of our story work. And I think that's really helped keep the success of the project in mind. And when possible, use the effort impact scale to try to find the priority in conjunction with the story mapping. So I think that's the brief introduction of story mapping. Feel like I might have gone too fast, but luckily we have lots of time, I think, for Q&A. Did I miss anything?
No,
Okay.
I think we got everything. Unless there's questions from anyone in the audience?
Yeah, you have one Q&A, and thank you both so much. This is very interesting. But someone is asking, thank you for sharing Miro as a tool to do storyboarding activity. What do you think of this tool as a way to do an asynchronous storyboarding activity, like say across a community like Samvera for prioritizing open issues for something like Hyrax?
I would say indeed. I mean, most of the work that we do is asynchronous with our customers. And for the most part, our teams have been distributed as well. And we've used this and other tools, and Miro just has been the one that we've landed on over maybe the last year. Really, it has the tools that we just, I think, that have really helped us up our game. Norm, do you have anything to add?
I was going to say, you can also take a look and see if actually there was some participation. So you can start to see here our actual history of what we were doing in here. So there is some way to track to make sure that people are looking. That's maybe one thing that people are looking for when you're doing the asynchronous work, is making sure, did people do some of that work, right?
Yeah, it might inform whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
While we're waiting for other questions, is there anything particularly challenging that you've run into, or sort of problems using Miro that you've already worked out in this process, or sort of things to watch out for?
I think one of the things is when you're trying to, mostly when we're trying to ideation, is there's a lot of stuff going on. Everybody's trying to put post-it notes on the board, and you start copying and duplicating things. What happens is people tend to step over each other a little bit. And it's mainly just a user problem that you thought you grabbed something and you didn't. So you just have to remind everybody to be patient and kind to yourself and to everyone. To, you know, sometimes these, for example, on the board here, if I were to have this and then Rachel will come along, when I select an object, I'm the owner of it, and no one else can take it. So that's the only user interface issue that I can see that was a problem.
Sometimes what we'll do too is maybe you want your own color, so you can kind of create a bunch of tickets in one color and then just move them, and then those are your very own. So that's kind of one way we've helped not step on each other. Another thing that we've done is just like, here's Norm's area down in the lower left quadrant, and here's mine. And we're just kind of copying and pasting our own cards.
Great. We have a question. So for clarification, who should be calling for or facilitating the meetings? Would it perhaps be product owners?
Yeah, I think product owners or project managers, I think depending on who typically does that in your organization. But really the one who's owning, you know, what we work on eventually is the product owner. So I'd say someone else can facilitate that, so the product owner can be a part of it. But who owns that is the outcome is the product owner, I think.
Great. Do you have any examples you can share of finding information you didn't know before after your software project that came out as a result of this storyboarding process?
Ooh, repeat.
Sure. Do you have any examples of, I guess, things that you have learned about a software project that came out only as a result of you doing the storyboarding process?
I wish I had a specific example. I do know when we started to do this, at least the product team has walked away thinking, oh we learned so much from the team that informed our backlog or informed our stories or structure that way. I don't have specifics, but we got jazzed really when we started using this with clients and with customers and with our internal process.
Oh, great. Another question. I really like the point about using story mapping at any point in a project, not just at the start. Are there any examples you can share from your experience about when or how story mapping was used to clarify or refocus a project that was already underway?
That's also a good question. Specifically, I know that we recently took to the board when we were kind of going down one avenue, and it was maybe just kind of chugging along, and we've just been like, hey, let's go to the board and let's map this out, and whether it's a story map or a user flow, but really those exercises just are very helpful in just hitting the pause button and then realigning.
And everybody all of a sudden remembers, oh, that's right. That's why we did that. Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yes. Now I remember. And so sometimes it's just more of that shared context and understanding the 50,000 foot ideation of why you're doing what you're doing instead of down in the trees, looking at the leaves and whatnot. So you would go up, and I think then the developers or maybe the project manager, everyone kind of gets a, here's where we're going. Here's why we want to go there.
That makes a lot of sense. And Mark from your team chimed in to say that we've often clarified requirements in ways that made the work much easier to implement. We've also found ideas that fell in the high effort, low impact quadrant that we could drop from scope.
Right.
Yep.
Have you all used Miro for other things besides storyboarding? Have you used it for other approaches?
Indeed.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've used it for flows. I've used it for looking at site maps to discover or understand a new project. I may, as a UX designer, go ahead of everyone on the team and actually build up a flow of what I see, and then have a discussion with the developers and like, oh, well, you're missing this, this, and that. So we have different tools. Again, it's a tool for us to share and collaborate. So that's the best part about it.
Yeah. So yeah, wireframes, user flows.
Yeah.
And that's the user flow has actually been very informative. And again, there are templates that Miro has, but you can go freeform as well.
That's very cool. We have one last question. Can you share more pictures of Zuzu in Slack?
I might have a few. I just get a kick out of that particular shot, but yeah, thank you. That's sweet. These are, oh, somebody put an iguana. Oh, bearded dragon.
Yep.
I love it.
I think Max put that in there.
Oh, thank you, Max.
Thank you, Max.
Very nice.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for this.
Well, and yeah, and thank you everyone for coming and listening.
Absolutely.
Okay, it is now time to round out our day with some lightning talks. So first off, we have Elisa with author profile syncing with ORCID in Haiku. Elisa, I can't hear you. Now I can. I could hear you, but now I can't. Yes, there you are. Thank you.
All right.
You might just be cutting in and out.
Oh, okay. Really quick. Play the video for you. Maybe it's. We hope. Let's try this. Right?
Sorry, what was that?
You see this.
Might be a problem with your microphone because I'm just getting the first syllable of every time you start to speak. If you want, we can swap you to the end.
Sorry. I can see my screen.
I can see your screen. I can see your screen. Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, what was that?
I'll play.
I know you were going to play a video.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see the.
Sorry, I can't hear it.
Can you see that?
Can still see your deliverables list.
Oh. Okay. Let me share some. Okay. I think this might be better. You see the video now?
Yes, see the video now. Sure do.
Can you hear?
Not hearing anything. Okay.
Sorry about this. The, just share sound. I think this will work.
Okay.
Try one more time.
Hello, my name's Paul Janelli, and as you can see from my heat map, I've been working on open source for Ubiquity Press for about a year now. The point of this video is to give you a brief overview of the Hyrax ORCID gem that we've been working on, which provides a link between Hyrax and Haiku repositories and a user's ORCID profile. So if you want any more information about the gem, you can find it on the Ubiquity Press GitHub organization. For those that don't know, ORCID is a unique identifier that helps distinguish researchers who might be referenced in works. So the gem itself integrates pretty seamlessly into Hyrax. So the first thing you have to do after obviously installing the gem in your gem file is go down to features and just toggle on the feature flipper. Now, when you go up to your profile, you'll see that there's actually an extra panel here that gives you a little extra text about what it is and what it's used for. So if you link your ORCID user, this is the sandbox. So you have to use a mailinator email address here. If you sign in, the first time you do this, you'll be asked to authorize the specific trusted organization. And then you'll be redirected back to the profile page. So there are a number of different ways that the Hyrax ORCID gem will sync works, and I've been referring to these as sync strategies. The first strategy will automatically sync any work where your ORCID ID has been referenced. This is the quickest and easiest way to get works up onto your ORCID profile. The second way will sync any works where you are the primary creator, and if you are referenced as a secondary or additional or creator or contributor, then you will be notified up in the Hyrax notifications, and you'll be given an option to either delete the notification or sync from there. The third option is a manual option where you won't be notified and no works will be synced automatically, but all works that your ORCID ID is referenced in either the creator or the contributor field will be listed down here. So you will have a little toggle that you can select to send that stuff, to publish that stuff to ORCID or to remove from your profile. Because Hyrax also has a front-end user profile, we are giving the option to list either your educational qualifications, employment, etc., to display on there. So that will be pulled in from ORCID in a background JavaScript request and then presented on the page. So I'm going to tick all of these, and I'm going to set this guy to automatically send all of his work. Just save. So as you'll see, I've got two users logged in. The first is the Hyrax admin user, and the second is just a normal bog standard user. So I'm going to link both of their accounts. So this user wasn't asked to authorize their account because they'd already done it. And so the next time they come in, they're just taken straight back to the page. Because this user's profile doesn't have any information on it, I'm only going to show the works when they're added. And I'm going to say that any work that they're referenced in as a secondary creator or contributor is going to be notified. So they're going to be notified about. So we can see that their ID is 8278, and this user's is 4625. So I'm going to go and create a work. I'm going to add myself, of the first user, sorry, as the primary creator, and I'm going to add the secondary user, which is also me, but before I got married, I changed my name as an additional creator. So that is keyword. I'm going to select a write statement. I'm also going to add some tests. File. Just going to be some random wallpaper. The gem is only concerned about public works. So if it's set to institutional, embargo, private, etc., then no notifications, no automatic syncing will happen at all. So I'm going to select public and agree to terms and conditions. And
the go button. So now that my work's been synced, I'm going to refresh this user. And we see that we've got a work where I've been referenced, the second user, which is here. And we've got a notification. So if I go into my notifications, I can see that the first user has added me as a collaborator on the work title that we just created. Because of the way that hierarchies works, we can't actually delete the notifications after, well, I don't believe you can anyway, delete the notifications after the work has been synced. So once the user has approved the action to sync it to their profile, they're just told that they can delete the notification. So now if I go into my profile, I can see that I've got one generic work, sorry, a generic work, it's just the title, the contributors, and the description that we added. If I go back to the other user's profile, which is a little more fleshed out, and refresh, I can see that I've got that work as well. So if I go back to the dashboard and into the profile, I get the same works listing here as I do. And with this sync to ORCID checkbox, so if I decide that actually I don't want this work to be synced anymore, I can untick this, and in the background, the request will happen, send a delete notification to ORCID, and the next time I come back, the work has been removed. And this is the same for both of the users. So the other thing to show you is that when you go to the user's profile page, we add a little text to tell the user that something is happening in the background because we're making an external API request. And we display the information that the user has on their profile. The reason there's no works here is because we've just taken off the work that would have been presented. So if I resync this, and now just refresh this, you can see that that work is being pulled in as well. And that's all. If you have any questions, then get in touch through the GitHub page. And if you find any issues or you want to try it out, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise. That was such a cool feature. Thanks for sharing. I'm glad we were able to get it going.
Any questions, please get in touch. Hold and I'll email.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Bess with doxing prevention and recovery.
Hey, can you see me?
Yes, I can see and hear you, but not your screen yet.
Okay, great. How about now?
Yes.
Great. All right, I changed the title of my talk a little bit. Hi, my name is Beth Sadler. I work at Princeton University Library, and I use she or they pronouns. I identify as non-binary. This talk has a content warning. I'm going to talk about suicide, but not in detail. First, a definition. Doxing is the act of publicly revealing private information about an individual or organization, usually through the internet. Doxing may be carried out for various reasons, including online shaming, extortion, and vigilante aid to law enforcement. Here I'm going to focus on doxing as a tool of public shaming. So things I learned from being doxed. Number one, I will survive. This year, I had private, intimate details of my life published on the internet. My family, my friends, my employers, and my colleagues, not to mention lots of strangers, now know things about me that I didn't want public. It was terrifying and shaming and really difficult. And also, here I am, still here. I will survive this. But not everyone has survived this. I'm here to talk to you because not everyone does survive. This is a comic by Sophie Labelle that prodded my conscience into giving this talk, even though I'm afraid that calling attention to myself like this might make the harassment worse. In the comic, the first person says, trans people should stop playing the victim. Nobody is out to get you. And then the second person says, did you know that there's an entire online community dedicated to harassing and stalking trans and non-binary people? They target the most vulnerable or visible people online and make their lives as hard as possible by spreading lies and rumors about them and by attacking their friends and family. Their bullying has caused the deaths of several people. They are murderers. This is not a game, this is real life. And then at the bottom it says, RIP, Near, Julie, Chloe, and other victims of kiwifarms.net will get you justice. We never have all of the information about why a person might die from suicide, but being doxxed, bullied, and publicly shamed certainly do not improve anyone's mental health. A thing I learned this year is that a common outcome of doxing is that the victim loses their job. This felt shocking to me when I learned it. The victim loses their job? But upon reflection, it isn't that surprising. Employers often don't know what doxing is. They don't know that it disproportionately affects people with marginalized identities, people of color, women, trans and non-binary people, people with disabilities. All are disproportionately targeted by online harassment, including doxing. Even when a victim isn't fired, online harassment makes it more difficult to do our jobs. As a software developer, I have to maintain an online presence. I have to use online tools to commit and review code, to engage in conversations, and to attend conferences like this. But I also learned that there are ways to help. I am here giving this talk because I want to say thank you. When I was being attacked this year, people from this community reached out to me to make sure I was doing okay. Thank you. It makes a huge difference. It isn't always easy to know when someone is struggling. Because of the nature of public shaming, a person experiencing it might try to keep it as secret as possible. That's why it is vital that we establish communities where it is safe to bring our whole selves to work and where we can safely discuss the challenges we are facing. If you are facing harassment, please reach out to the community helpers. We will not always be able to stop the bad behavior when it is coming from outside the community, but knowing that you are not alone, sharing your experiences with others, and finding ways to ensure that you are at least protected within your professional circles can make a big difference. I am grateful to Heather Greer-Klein and Hannah Frost and all of the people who worked on the new Samvera Code of Conduct and Anti-Harassment Policy. This year, I relied on this policy to protect my ability to do my job, and it worked. Big thanks also to my boss at Princeton, Kate Lynch, who checked in on me regularly and made sure I had the support I needed. I'm so grateful to be part of a community and a workplace that prioritizes everyone's safety and ability to participate. And finally, I'd like to share some resources that were helpful to me. I highly recommend following these guides to secure your online presence and plan for your personal information security, ideally before you experience a data breach. I also highly recommend the bystander intervention training offered by Hollaback. Princeton University Library offered this training to all staff this year, and it was very useful. I also want to recommend the guide for employers published by Crash Override. I would like to see more awareness of this subject in management training and planning for online events and collaborations. In closing, I want to again say thank you. Being a part of this community means so much to me, and I'm glad to still be here.
Thank you so much, Bess. We're so glad you're here. And thank you for sharing that. So our final lightning talk for today is the from Dandy, the IIIF React Media Player Component Library.
Thanks, Heather. I hope you can see my screen and hear me.
I can see, and you're a little bit soft, but I can hear you.
Okay, is this better?
That's better.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Jalanji Bitana. I'm a front-end developer with the Avalon team at Indiana University. Today, I'm going to talk about the IIIF React Media Player, focusing on the recent component changes. First of all, what is IIIF React Media Player? It is a component library exportable via NPM, and it uses a IIIF 3.0 presentation manifest to render multiple components. We had only a media player component and a structured navigation component up until recently. And since the last virtual connect, we have been working on a transcript component. And we're glad to say that we have completed its work, and it's included in our latest release, version 1.2.0. First, let's see what the use case was for this component. The first one is from a community perspective, where there's a need for a client that can render transcript annotations in a IIIF 3.0 presentation manifest. And the second one was from Avalon's perspective, where we needed a way to render transcript data in Avalon alongside our current player, which does not utilize a IIIF manifest to read the resources. So to cater for both of these use cases, we designed a transcript component as an independent component. What it means is that this can be used without the IIIF player wrapper like the other two components we have. This wrapper contains the state providers acting as the central state management system, and it enables communication among the components by sharing the state information. And the transcript component is not making use of the state providers. This way, it can be integrated with different players out there. And also, this component supports multiple transcript file formats, which we will talk later in detail. And last but not least, this provides synchronization with playback when you provide timed transcripts. Since the transcript component is not connected to the state provider like the other two components, it requires a couple of props to be rendered. The first one of them is the player ID, and it refers to the ID of the HTML player on page. If you're using this along with the IIIF player, then the value of this would be IIIF media player. Then we have the transcripts prop, which contains a list of objects for each canvas. And each of these objects has a canvas ID starting from 0. In IIIF manifest, the canvas count starts from 1, but here we have it starting from 0. So it's more of an index rather than ID. So that's that. And each canvas can have multiple transcripts. So the items is a list of transcript files, each having a title and a URL. So let's see how you can use this in your application. And there are actually two ways you can use this. The first one is with the IIIF player. So this code shows a full integration of the IIIF component library in Avalon. We have the media player, the structured navigation components wrapped within the IIIF player. And it fetches the manifest from the given URL and shares the manifest with its consuming two components. Below that, we have the transcript component. This particular instance has a single canvas with two transcripts. The first one is directly fetching the WebVTT file, and the second one is fetching a WebVTT file via the IIIF annotations. So this is how it's rendered on the page in Avalon's item page. We have the three components, the player, the structured navigation, and the transcript component with the metadata panel in Avalon. And the second way to use the transcript component is with a different player. So we are using the same example of Avalon here with the current media player. Let's first look at what are the changes that you need to do in your player so that the transcript component can be integrated with that. The first one is to add an ID for the HTML players if you don't have one. So here we have Avalon media player for both video and audio players. And then you need to add a new attribute called data canvas index and a mechanism for it to be updated as the canvas changes within the player, so that the transcript component can react to the canvas changes in the player and render the correct transcripts on page. And then using an appropriate package or gem, you can bring the transcript component into your application. Here we are using React Rails in Avalon, and we have created a React component within Avalon called React FFF transcript to bring in the external transcript component. So once you have this set up, this is how it looks in Avalon's item page. You have all the existing elements, the current player, the sections, the metadata panel, along with the transcript component from the library on the bottom right corner. Now let's see what other data input formats the component can digest. The first one is a FFF manifest annotation with supplementing motivation. And these annotations can be either a list of individual annotations for each transcript fragment or an annotation point to an external transcript resource like we saw before. The transcript parser within the component filters the annotations with the supplementing motivation and then parse them accordingly so that the component can render them on the page. These external transcript resources can be pointed to a JSON file with the annotations list or a transcript file in these formats, the WebVTT format, Microsoft Word document, or plain text file. And these file types can be directly fed to the props as well. So let's see how these transcript formats gets rendered within the component. First, we have here is a list of annotations, each representing a transcript fragment. As you can see, the motivation for each of these is supplementing, which the parser makes use of to identify the relevant annotations. The FFF annotations have a property called target, which presents the URI of the canvas, and it uses the media fragment syntax, providing a start and end timestamps for that particular transcript fragment. Once you feed this into the component, these annotations get populated like this on the page with a timestamp and a text with the synchronization with the playback is enabled. So, and also WebVTT files are rendered in a similar way if they're in the standard format. Next, we have the Word documents and the plain text files. Here we have a plain text file given as a supplementing annotation in the manifest, and it gets rendered within an iframe utilizing a Google Doc Weaver. One thing to note here is that these file types do not synchronize with playback, even if they contain timed text within them. Now let's take a look at a demo of how all of these work. Here, what you see is the standalone player in our GitHub demo page. It has all the three components. So when the media is playing, the transcript component reacts to the time update event within the player and highlights the relevant transcript fragment. Using the transcript fragments, the player can be synced to the starting timestamp of that particular transcript fragment like this. And also when you're using this with the structured navigation component, the navigation updates from that component is captured by the transcript component via the time update event in the player. Like that. So that's how all of it works. So to the next one. So this was our to-do list from the last Virtual Connect presentation. And since then, we have updated the parser to work with IIIF 3.0 presentation manifest. And we have added the transcript support as a new component. And in the future, we are hoping to work on these and also improve the player's functionality so that it's in par with our current Avalon player. So we would like to keep improving this further, and we appreciate your contributions. It can be either writing new code or testing this out and giving feedback, and also reporting issues with it on our GitHub repo. And also you can reach us via our Slack channel listed here. And here's more ways to connect with us at Avalon. And we have a poster presentation tomorrow evening. Please join that discussion if you'd like to learn more about how Avalon handles transcripts using this. That's it from me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nanji. Thanks everyone who presented today, and to all of our lightning talk presenters, and to all of you for attending. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow and the rest of the week. Tomorrow we have a technology updates for Avalon and Hyrax, Haiku, and Valkyrie, and then more presentations. So I hope we will see you there. Have a good rest of your day.